3, 2, 1. Mr. Matt Frakes, thank you so much for joining me today, bud.
Hey, thanks, man. How you doing, Dr. Bubbs? Doing all right?
I'm good. I'm good. Listen, I appreciate you carving out some time before things kick off this year for you guys. And maybe before we jump into things, can you give folks a little whirlwind tour of your background, and then we can jump into today's conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah. My name is Dr. Matt Frakes. You just call me Matt. So I'm the director of sports nutrition here at University of Notre-Dame. Prior to here, I jumped through a lot of stuff. I didn't even know if I was going to become a dietitian in a sense as well. So me coming and becoming a dietitian, it's kind of boring as compared to everybody else's. So I literally just seen the word diet and dietetics, and that's what led me into picking the profession.
Nice.
And I told my coach that's what I was going to go with. So I just leaned towards that and just went with that since then. Played football in college, American football in college, was outside linebacker at that time. So I retired to pass in 2011. That's when I graduated at Bowling Green State University with my degree in dietetics. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. So then I went towards personal training. So I was an assistant training manager at a gym that my best friend's dad owned at the time. Then was playing indoor football for a season. That didn't work out. It was just time to just hang it up, retire completely as an athlete because I'm not going to the NFL. I'm a subpar athlete. It is what it is. So came to terms, went to get my master's and also my dietetic internship at Bowling Green State University, where I did a distance program. And then at that time, did all my rotations back in Columbus, where I grew up at Columbus, Ohio. Once I got done with that, was a clinical dietitian and also worked as a dietitian at my private practice. So worked with some elite athletes there. Whether it was NFL athletes, NBA athletes, Major League Baseball, I had those as my personal clients. And then I seen that there was a graduate assistant position opened up at University of Mississippi to pay for the PhD. Nice. So then I went to Ole Miss to get my doctorate, and I was the full-time dietitian for baseball and track and field as a part of my role of getting that graduate assistantship to pay for that doctorate. So I did that for 2 years. Me and my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. I asked her to marry me. We found out that we were pregnant shortly after. Wow. Family was growing.
There you go.
Obviously, that graduate assistant stipend, that's not going to pay for and take care of a family as you wanted to. So got a job as associate director at University of Louisiana, was the associate director there, primarily worked with basketballs and golfs, and then also in track and field too. And then found out that actually I needed to be closer to home. So Louisiana is about 15 hours from Ohio. Mm-hmm. And my wife is from Ohio too. So I found out after we got married, we had our wedding in Jamaica. Father was getting ready in his latter stages of cancer. It was just all last minute. Drove back to Ohio with my family. Was there for my dad for that month and a half until, I got to see him transition. And then it was just time to get back closer to home. Worked at University of Louisville. Dr. Ivy called me, the director there at the time, Melissa Carlson, they both called me. And it wasn't for a director role, but they said, they understood my situation. And it was to, be the full-time dietitian for both men's and women's basketball at University of Louisville. So, or Louisville, however people pronounce it, but it's Louisville. So, was there for a year. Went to the Sweet 16 with the women's team. The men's team, we fell short, didn't make it to the tournament, the NCAA tournament at that time. So, after that, got a call from actually the AD here, and then also a colleague of mine had put my name in a hat here without me even knowing. Was like, hey, Frakes, I know you got a background in football. I know you're leaning towards probably want to get back into American football too. So they actually got a position opened up here for a director role. So they called me. We had a great conversation. They actually called once I left from the tournament, and we got eliminated from Stanford at the time, which that was a great experience, by the way. They had itinerary from myself and also my family. Got us up here. We seen the campus, fell in love with it, got the position. And then now here, I'm the director here at University of Notre Dame.
Now it's game time. Well, listen, before we jump into what's going to happen, what you're preparing for, this upcoming season, I mean, obviously with your background, having seen so many different athletes in different sports, can you maybe touch on what that was like over the years of getting exposed to these different sports and, maybe some of the lessons or misconceptions, things you learned along the way?
Absolutely. And it was something I needed to do. me having a football background, and even with having that football background and playing the game, from the logistics standpoint of even meeting the needs of what our athletes needs is different, because I didn't have a dietitian when I played football at Bowling Green State University. It's a mid-major Division I school. Didn't have a dietitian all whatsoever. So anything I did or anything that me and my teammates talked about, it was based on what I learned from my general classes. So I basically just applied just everything just from the general conceptions as far as like what I learned in class for myself. So after that, and then when I was working with all these different sports, I wanted to give myself a break. I was kind of bitter of not being able to go anything with the game into my dreams or whatever it may be. So, and I thought to myself that I needed to kind of get exposed to different sports, really get a feel for how other athletes are performing, living, and just those different settings that they're in. So that's why baseball was a great thing to get into, because I wanted to be uncomfortable. And I wanted to kind of learn all these different sports too. So
with baseball, if we start there, I mean, what were some of the things that jumped out at you there? Because obviously traditionally you haven't grown up playing baseball. I mean, that's not a sport where, we're thinking too much about nutrition, and obviously the body composition have changed over the years, obviously more athletic now. What was that like?
Yeah, honestly, man, we have a conception that or perception that, and we were ranked very high. It's SEC baseball, Ole Miss baseball. And they take baseball serious in the SEC. So with that being said, you would think that with them being at that level, especially when competing against rather or not being drafted in the majors and trying to get those athletes from there, that their nutrition, their performance, everything is A1, meaning that everything is just perfect. It's not it at all whatsoever. It's horrible. It's horrible. So trying to
kids after all, right?
They're just kids at the end of the day, and everybody's coming from different backgrounds, different exposures to foods, different limitations, whether or not they come from a great financial means and background where they have a little bit more exposure to SEC coaches or just coaches in general that kind of guide them into eating a little bit better, not eating as much fast food, or it's just a point of where maybe that they're either one raising themselves or they just come from a low socioeconomic background, and what they're used to is not really nutrient dense at all whatsoever.
And so where do you start there, Matt, when you're with those guys? Like where's the first level of things that you're going to layer in? How did you start with them?
Yep. Honestly, it's me getting to know them on a personal level. So, nice. And I grew up in a low socioeconomic background. So I know the difficulties, the adjustments, and all that stuff as well from personal experience. And even from today's, it's still different, but just from having that feel for it, it's different. Mm-hmm. And then also now going into where I'm able to provide a little bit more nutrient dense foods for myself, for my family, be able to afford these things. It's you can play for basically both ends of the spectrum. So for me, myself, I want to meet them where they are, see what all they know, what their exposure was to even someone like myself working with them on their nutrition habits. What have they heard? Because nowadays they're getting information from all over the place. So trying to see as far as, okay, well, what have, from your point of view, has worked in the past? Or it may be just in a sense of we need to increase their fruit and vegetable intake and start from the general basics. And I have some athletes to where they came in, they had a dietitian, they know their calorie needs, they know their macronutrient needs. So now it's just touching up as far as like what we need to do supplemental wise to guide into now their academic schedule, to guide into now their travel schedule, and making sure that they're meeting their needs there, adjusting whatever foods we need to make sure that they continue to develop. Body composition is also going in towards the direction we need to stay and go, because now they got to adjust for the academic schedule too, and trying to make sure that they're doing that as a student athlete.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, in terms of layering on that foundation for them, with being busy in school, obviously recovery and sleep, that whole piece. I mean, did you find yourself supporting that sort of athlete health aspect and recovery more so than sort of a specific, in-game or training specific type nutrition?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So obviously we have a team of, we got the academic counselors, our regular sports medicine staff as well, athletic training or sports medicine physicians as well, physical therapists. And then also you have our strength conditioning coaches here. And now we have mental performance coaches too. So working with them hand in hand and kind of having that tight relationship with all of those different spectrums and kind of see, okay, making sure all of our conversations and what we're discussing is all aligned.
For sure.
And each one is guiding towards each one's goals for that individual and for the team in a sense overall. So it's more so both, because not only do I have to take care of that, making sure our conversation and working with those individuals are aligned, but I still have to do my job into making sure that we're providing them the best of what they need at the time, while working with what they're being exposed to make sure that we meet each other in the middle for in-game, pre-game, post, preseason, postseason, and every single aspect of those situations.
100%. And with those baseball players back in the day, what were some of the big mistakes that you would see with guys that would be the typical things that we might see today with clinicians, practitioners listening in?
So my guys then, they were huge on energy drinks before I got into the picture. They definitely were chugging down Bangs and Red Bulls like it was no joke. And then also, it wasn't just a can in itself. It was maybe 2, 3.
Yeah. Wow.
throughout right before. And then also the other thing was, for them, I just needed to get them to get their general fruit and vegetable intake higher, their lean protein needs. I needed them to meet that. Basically, they weren't, because a lot of their food was more so going to be fast food. You see guys walking in with basically rather be Wendy's Baconators, or rather be Wendy's breakfast as well. And then even from the food that they had, the grill at that time at Ole Miss, they provide a lot of great foods. So some guys, even though that we had the foods accessible to them to build a great performance plate, they still went out by themselves to get whatever they wanted. So it's about working with them on habits, that sense of exactly.
It's tough to break those habits.
Yep. And you have to work with them on that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's and especially when they're young adults, it's just so much to be taught and to be layered in. And, if we transition from that baseball group over to working in women's sport, women's basketball, tell me about some of the different things that you're thinking about or having to consider when you're putting together that performance plan for the female basketball players.
Yeah, it's for me, it was trying to learn more so from throughout the time, even in a sense of the menstrual cycles, alongside with how they're typically ate. They eat generally almost the same from what I was exposed to. And then now trying to guide as far as like, okay, what other foods do we need to improve on and implement based upon the menstrual cycles as well, to make sure that they're meeting their needs, making sure they're meeting their iron needs, making sure that they're meeting their calcium needs as well, because you see, as far as those type of injuries, that's more related to those suitable towards not meeting those needs there. Soft tissue injuries, being anemic. And we had those assessments done, and across the board, you would see that 9 out of my 13, 14 players were anemic or had low vitamin D levels. So trying to address that and making sure that with my female athletes there, ensuring that we're meeting those, not just through supplementation, but exposing them to those type of foods, because they're athletes at the end of the day, and they have the same background as you would in comparison to basically a male athlete, and also a limited time frame of wanting to even have an ability to cook for themselves, no matter what gender that they are. So trying to basically address that and help benefit that by educating them on what we can provide them, and whatever I give them, whatever the team gives them, making sure that, okay, these are some preferences that they had listed in our initial assessments, and then trying to see, okay, until we built their palates to be adjusted to having those more leaner choices and those nutrient-dense choices, how can we bring in what they're used to, but in a way where they will choose what we want them to have as well, that's more suitable for their performance and recovery.
Yeah, it's always interesting to have to sort of nudge people towards where you want to get them to and create that environment that makes it just easier to make those sort of choices. And really key to be able to have access to those tests, just like you've done, to be able to show athletes, isn't it, that, hey, your iron levels are low, or B12 is low, or various things to really highlight to the athlete, okay, this is why we need to do X, Y, and Z. I'm curious, with those athletes, and obviously plant-based diets are more and more popular. Is that something that was, potentially one of the reasons why you're seeing more anemias there, or what was your experience with some of the plant-based diets at Louisville?
I would say not at Louisville. I would say more so with my track and field athletes.
Gotcha.
With my basketball athletes, I maybe only had one, if that, 1 or 2 from each men's and women's team that attempted, didn't last long because they couldn't remove a lot of the foods that they really loved to transition to that plant-based, or was using it in the incorrect way. And then alongside with that, it was more so my track and field athletes at Ole Miss were more leaning towards that plant-based diet. And also I have some athletes here on the football end that's leaning towards more so of a plant-based diet. And then it's trying to make sure that we define it in a way of, now we're using it as plant-based, or are we doing it as, are you trying to lean towards vegetarian and vegan as well? Because some of them, they're using it in the incorrect way.
Yeah, that's getting back to that idea of, why are athletes engaging in this diet? I mean, it's the question around, is the athlete going plant-based, let's say vegan, to be able to increase performance, to improve health? They're trying to understand where the athlete's at. So, from your frame of reference, how do you start to engage in those conversations? Because we know that athletes are people. And so if my, girlfriend, best friend, somebody around me goes plant-based vegan, then all of a sudden tells me it's great. Hey, I might try it as well. And of course, we want all athletes to eat lots of plants. But with that sort of conversation, if you start seeing some of those anemias or B12s, how do you start to address that or interact with your athlete who's deciding to go down that path?
Yep, it's also about my presence. Like, they have to trust me too at the end of the day and make sure that I'm there and available and know who I am. So even from the short times of me even being at the locations I was for maybe 1 year to 2 years, it's hard to build relationships when you're there for a short amount of time, but sure. I'm someone that can build relationships fast. So that was my benefit in there. So I would say it's just more so being with them while they're during the times that they're eating, trying to just shooting the stuff with them, just ensuring, outside of just even nutrition, building a relationship, a personal relationship with that too. And then seeing, okay, what are some things they're doing? Because they'll tell you once they trust you that what they're attempting, what they've heard from their coaches, what they've heard from their friends, from other athletes at other institutions, or what they heard from a recent documentary or from something that they've read online. They will tell you those things as long as they trust you as well. And then they see that you're not just going to basically just shoot down anything they have to say, but you're able to have that conversation with them and they can take from that conversation as well. So for me, the conversation, it was very easy sitting down with them to see, okay, what they're doing first. And then when it came time to be able to address those needs, basically say, okay, look, I have your assessments, I have your lab values. Now, because you're doing this right here, what I've been noticing you doing, this is something we got to take in consideration and we need to address to make sure that you're performing well and that you're able to recover at your best too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, isn't it? I mean, anybody, whether it's an athlete or a client, doesn't want to feel like they're being judged. So when you sit down and eat together, if you're the dietitian, sport dietitian, nutritionist, whatever, if you're just getting to know someone and you don't have a relationship, that's a natural sort of inclination, isn't it? To sort of think that, okay, this person's sitting down to kind of check out what I'm eating here. And so, yeah, it's so important to be able to build that relationship. And again, a lot of practitioners listening in who are probably just jumping in with different teams or groups. And, on the one hand, it can kind of seem obvious on how to build relationships, but on the other hand, it's still not that easy, right? It's something that has to come. So what are some techniques, or what are some strategies, or what are the things that maybe you naturally do that help you to build some of those relationships?
So I'm just myself when I first walk in. So I'm very goofy at the end of the day. So I have a great way of just basically just whatever that they're discussing, seeing what they're talking about. It may be something from a movie. It may be something as far as just from everyday life. I can be like, it's still professional line, but I can be someone like an uncle coach.
There you go.
So to where,
humor's great, right? Humor always helps.
Exactly. Sure. Exactly. So to kind of just break those things down there, or even if it's in the sense of, if we're making a competition where it comes to basically, okay, we have these points that are accrued from making the right habits, from meeting their goal needs as far as from their weights as well, to make sure to see if they're consuming what they need to hydration wise, depending on how many bottles that they consume, all that stuff. So just making it a little game in that sense and building that relationship there. Like, see, I could have told you could have got these points for your team there, but now you're slacking and you're behind. Team is behind because you didn't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So just like little things like that, because they like competition, like they like games like that, and that's a kudos to our staff, our performance staff, and trying to make it fun in that way. And then the other way, as far as for me, it's just, again, being personable. Sometimes it's not just even talking about nutrition or whatsoever. It may be talking about what they're doing academic wise. Being a student athlete, from my experiences, what's troubling them, seeing like what's going on. And this is still staying within my boundaries of not stepping outside of my lane when it comes to basically the social cues and the social aspects that the mental performance or those individuals that deal with that, not stepping on our toes there and staying within that lane.
There's always those intersections. And so, I mean, it's good for everyone to be able to appreciate and understand. And it's always interesting to me that even if you want to get 1 or 2 points across to an athlete, how if you can spend most of the time talking about the things they're talking about, or life, or family, or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, when you mention those one or two things, it's like and you have that relationship, and they take it on board much easier than, oftentimes you want to just jump right in and say, you got to eat more of this because you got to get your iron levels up, or you need more of that because of B12. And if you don't have that relationship, then at first it can again feel, even at these levels where, to your point, the athletes are there to perform, it's not always so straightforward. And
Exactly.
on that point with women's performance, whether it's scenario, condition, or if we go the other side, maybe supplementation that was different with the women's teams, female athletes versus some of the men that you've been working with?
Yeah. So with my women's team, after we did our assessments, it was more so I tried to, as much as possible with them, whenever we did their menu developments and whenever we had anything as far as like on the road or games, as far as like trying to gauge what we need to have, their food based on the travel schedule and all that stuff. It was more so I made sure that when I had their supplement kits ready, basically, because I control when they got their supplements, how they got their supplements, all that. So to make sure the compliance was there.
Yeah.
Because my women's teams were smaller, especially basketball, and I could afford to do so. And when I traveled with them, it was more so long as I had more vitamin C, iron, B12, and then along with their vitamin D too. So as compared to my men's, with them, I'm supplementing more with magnesium, and this is because of football, more contact. Magnesium, fish oil. I have those conversations with them about creatine on their own because we can't give that to them. I've had those same conversations with my female athletes too for the benefits as well, especially for my basketball players, for my hoopers, because that's basically what they're using as an energy source, alongside with that, replenishing those needs, especially for that long season that they have and those many games, 2-3 games in a week. And alongside, you got to take into consideration the travel schedule. So women athletes, it was again, iron, vitamin C, B12, vitamin D, conversations with creatine. My men's, fish oil, magnesium, fish oil, magnesium, conversation on creatine, vitamin D. And then for some reason with them, it was more so I had to do more with their hydration needs as compared to my women athletes.
Okay.
And from observation, when I attended both practices, it just seemed that my men, they have a lot more in their sweat rate as compared to my women athletes. And that's just, again, from my observation. My women's, they were a lot better on their hydration practices than my men were. Taking consideration,
better.
Exact compliance was better. It was a lot more, they listened a lot more as compared to on my men's side of things. They didn't drink enough water. They may have more prone to more extracurricular activities, more adult beverages, if you will.
That's dehydrating for sure.
Exactly.
Awesome, Matt. Well, listen, I mean, from there, if we talk, we've gone baseball, we've gone to your work in women's sport, and now obviously at Notre Dame, you guys are getting ready for the big football season.
Yeah.
With coming on board, what are some of the things that, leading into even preseason that you're having to think about and get into place for your athletes?
Yeah, see, this is year one. So leading here, the summertime, let's start with the summertime.
For sure.
So within the summer, it was a lot of changing what they were exposed to and the foods that they had accessible to them, especially coming after COVID, because now the handcuffs are a little bit more flexible. They're a little bit more off, and they are very excited about having me come into the picture. So it seems like appliance and things like that would have been just off the gate, they're just ready to go and execute.
100%.
And this team is very special because the type of athlete and players that our coaching staff recruits, especially with the rigorous academic schedule that is here, they have a definitive kind of definition of who they are, how they need to execute, and they are very coachable.
Fantastic.
Down to the T. You have some guys that, they think their way is still great, but they still want to listen to what you have to say. So it's
beats the alternative, right?
Right. It beats the alternative, because I had the complete opposite side of the spectrum too.
So as you get into preseason, obviously energy expenditure is going to be at its highest. And so what are some of the strategies that you've got? Obviously great that you got a compliant group that you can start to implement to make sure you're getting that caloric intake up. Because, even with football players, when guys get tired, sometimes we don't fuel as much and eat as much as we need to.
Exactly. Especially in the summertime and free season, especially with the humidity here, it's been a lot more than it has been in the past.
Okay.
From what everyone's telling me. So in that sense so with our training sessions, our lifts, our resistance training sessions, those have been, it's just over and over and over again. It's not that they're beating them down to the floor, but it's very challenging in a sense. And they're getting the most out of their adaptation, the most of trying to make sure that they are adapting to an environment that they're exposed to. And it's very hard, especially for our incoming players or those that came in early, even those that came in the springtime early as well, to adapt to this type of training environment. It is very difficult and very hard.
Yeah.
So trying to change their nutrition habits alongside with getting them to adapt to what they're being exposed to for the training session, and then having to come back for their agility / conditioning section as well. Like you said, caloric expenditure is a lot higher at this time frame. You want their body composition to adjust and adapt to its peak at this time frame as well. So from what we did our DEXA scans entirely to our entire team before we started with everything. Then alongside with that, to see what our baseline levels were, with their vitamin D, what our baseline levels were with their omega-3s as well. And then what their baseline levels were for some of those that had history of anemia with their iron intake too, in which we're going to adjust that later. But anyways, so have all those baseline measurements, a change as far as what we're giving them for training table, what we're changing as far as what this in the players lounge, snacks that's in the players lounge, more nutrient dense meals, more meals that are your to-go style or your meal prep style meals, more nutrient dense meals. And because we're in the Midwest, there's no reason for us not to use more so of our local farms and our local vendors as well.
100%.
And I'm big on community too. So we've been exposing them to more foods that are more nutrient dense, that is more local, that have a lot more humane practices when it comes to those farming practices too. So
amazing. That's great. I mean, those to-go meals are just so key, aren't they, for guys who they need to fuel up post practice. But then if it's not handy, if it's not just ready to eat, it's amazing how even if you're young and training hard and hungry, you can go 5, 6, 7 hours between practice and dinner or something and not be getting that fuel in. So, that's so key. And I imagine you guys have those throughout the year, or did you increase them at certain times of the year?
Yep, because right now we're going to increase them towards now, since it's the preseason, since they're here all day long.
Nice.
And with camp, we're starting from 7:45, and they don't leave here until basically like 9 or some sort like that. That's traditionally how it is. It's not just what they're doing for practice, but also you have their schedules when it comes to their meetings, position coach meetings, walkthroughs. What we're feeding them as far as like now we can feed them as far as that breakfast, lunch, and dinner scenario type of situation. Whereas in the summertime, they can only have, for those accounted hours, they can only have that one meal that we've been able to provide them. But then the snacks is going to be basically those to-go style meal prep meals, alongside with some breakfast sandwiches, things like that we give them, get the calories in, get more protein in, get more carbs in a sense. We're having a relationship with our Pure Green, basically those juice scenarios, more fruits and vegetables around them at all times, getting into more creative ways on how to put those into their bodies, more antioxidants as well.
Nice.
So we've been doing that, more fruits and vegetables around them. And then now that since we're in the preseason, the amount of food that we have them is unreal. So it's breakfast, lunch, dinner. You have their lounge stocked with basically all those meals that we have scenario wise. So even if they are hungry in their meetings, they can go ahead and eat, and they need to eat. Coaches already gave them the clearance to go ahead, and guys got to eat and hydrate as much as possible. We changed out their stations around here to make sure they have those refillable water stations around everywhere. Also, the fridges are always having some type of, rather it's Propel or water in a sense, and we save the Gatorade for around activity and practice and practice only. So, and
Matt, are there certain targets you have then for protein intake or carbohydrate intake for your guys? I mean, that might be position dependent, but are there certain general targets that you might have for the players?
Yep. So it's all dependent on, one, how they adapted and changed for the summertime, on what we have for their plans accordingly, based upon what they need as far as gram per kilogram basis of carbohydrates and proteins. And I try to meet their proteins first. Their protein needs first, because that's always the hardest for them. Anyway, some of them, and that was the biggest thing too. We made it to where they were able to see what they have exposed to training table wise and on a meal and on a plan on their phones, and be able to kind of see when they plug these things in. They thought that they were eating enough. They weren't at all whatsoever.
Tough, isn't it? Man? It's harder to get to those levels than people think, even athletes.
Yes. Yes, and visually seeing that, it was very helpful over the summertime. So now I can see that in this preseason is going to be a lot better for us, because now that they visually seen that, okay, what I've been eating, I've been used to eating, it was not enough. And now the days that I have eaten enough, even on the days where the strength coaches, they beat us down to the ground and our conditioning was almost unbearable, that my recovery to be able to handle the next bout of activity was still a lot better whenever compared to the times when I did not meet those needs. And they're starting to see that. They're starting to see that one by one. And that's been the biggest adjustment and win, I feel like, so far.
Is that sort of in that like 5, 6, maybe even 7 grams per kilo of carbohydrate, or obviously again, position dependent, but.
Yep. So we've been going, so for our position players, so our defensive backs, our running backs, our receivers, these individuals have all been on more so around between I would say a 7 to 9 gram now. Because even in their conditioning sessions, even in their individual sessions as well, they have a tendency of having a lot more mileage and a lot more transitions when they are running their own situations or when they're doing some extra work on their own too.
100%.
And I adjust for that for them. Now for my linebackers or for my linemen, it's just depending on the individual, anywhere between 5 to 7 grams as far as on a carbohydrate basis. And timing up those when they have the amounts they need, depending on the time they come in for the sessions that they have scheduled for their lift sessions and also for their team runs.
Yep.
Which is those conditioning / agility sessions, and planning around accordingly to make sure that they're meeting their needs. But the bolus, in a sense, will be maybe that 3 to 4 hours prior. And if it's an early morning session, then it's going to be something that's more simple that they can adjust and absorb quickly.
Get down before they have to get in and lift or practice, right?
Exactly. Right beforehand.
I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, too? Because obviously these are still kids who are growing. And I mean, they're trying to get them bigger and stronger, but they're also, in terms of growth and maturation, they're still not fully developed. So the amount of caloric intake, especially in a sport like football, where you've got just the contact adding to that caloric intake, obviously having to get up to some of those big numbers like 7, 8, 9 grams per kilo of carbohydrate. And Matt, if we shift gears a little bit here now, it's like in season, if we talk, I know there's a lot of different variables here, but, as we get into game days, is the focus shifting more to what we're doing sort of pregame to help support performance, or is it halftime nutrition to maintain that performance? Is it recovery? Now, I appreciate all those things are being addressed, but if you want to maybe touch on, one that comes to mind would be great.
Yep, absolutely. So like you said, all those things are being addressed. So, and we're in the planning phases right now of making sure that what we're eating, when we're eating it, and what the hotels will accommodate for our home and also our away game scenarios. So in a sense, it's more so of my main thing. Let's touch on the days leading up to. So the pre-game meals and also the days leading up to. That's going to be the more so thing that in season that I want to take care of for personal reasons and also for objective reasons for the team based upon their academic schedule, what they have to deal with, because they have the mental now, their mental perceptions, everything is increasing and heightened here because their academic schedule is so rigorous that they're even essentially, they're busy. They're all, some of them, you have half the team graduate in 3 years. So
mental stress, physical stress,
and physical
lack of sleep.
Exactly. A lot of them taking more caffeine later at night. So trying to counteract that, ensuring that they try to get into their sleep hygiene and kind of their deep sleep phases as much as possible. And it's hard, but in the season, that's what I want to address first. The days leading up to the game, how much you need to consume, what is their schedule, their academic schedule, what do you need to have in between class, during class, because you don't have time to eat a full meal in a sense of maybe during that lunchtime or before practice starts or something, because you want to get that extra sleep. You're not waking up until 10 minutes before class to walk into class in the morning time. So what can we provide you to make sure that's quick, easy, and sufficient to make sure that you're still staying on target and on your goals to make sure your body and your mind is adequately fueled?
It's amazing how even at the highest level, that's still, an issue or an area of concern, whether it's in the NBA or the NFL, this idea of like, again, just being human, people wake up a little bit late and then roll into training. And so being able to figure out a way of how do we get this smoothie in, with the protein, et cetera, or a meal that will go down quickly so that they can digest it and actually train. Because it is startling how many elite high-end athletes will consume very little, which one-off isn't the end of the world, but these things become patterns, don't they? And so over the course of a season, that starts to add up. And if we shift gears now towards the end of your season, what are some of the things? I mean, obviously fatigue accumulates. If athletes aren't sleeping as well, that accumulates. But is it more just a general fatigue? Is it the injuries that pile up? Walk us through some of the things that are top of mind there.
Man, you hit it right on the head. So you have both of those you have to consider. You have the general fatigue from the mental accumulation from the academic schedule, and also the physical fatigue as well, too, from that long duration, long schedule. And especially at this level here, the competition is not something that is small, a minute, or an easy rollover. It's not. And then as you get towards the latter end of the season, that's when your biggest competition comes into a factor. 100%. And their biggest teams that you have to compete against. Those are basically those games that are a make or break situation once October hits.
100%.
So, and you're taking that consideration. So the nutrition needs, you're trying to accommodate for that and adjust for that, sprinkling in a little bit of feel good meals of things that they enjoy.
Yeah. Helps with the energy intake. It's fun. They enjoy it. And it's nice to know that it's not bad. People always have this good versus bad, but I mean,
exactly. It's all about utilizing it for the best case scenario for the situation at hand and for the culture that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And then after that, now it's just about by this time we're planning for making into the postseason, rather that be as far as for bowl games and rather that be as far as for playoffs.
Best case scenario, right? Bowl games.
Best case scenarios.
Bowl games.
And then we're always planning to keep going and to play into a national championship. So that's what we're trying to plan for. And now it's about, okay, giving them basically whatever time that we can give them to take that break, to allow their bodies to, adjust, adapt, relax, breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they just got done with the hardest finals that they're going to have. And then on top of that, trying to allow their bodies and their minds to adjust. So now that we can get back into basically training and facing into ready to win a national championship, and then giving their bodies what their needs. Because now since their schedules are a little bit more flex, then we can control and manipulate a lot more what we need to give them in order to make sure that they're getting what they need and that they're able to have those foods available. And I can be a little bit more hands-on and present at that time too, since we're all in the same room a lot more than compared to the end season.
100%. And that's great stuff, Matt. And if we shift gears here a little bit and maybe talk about some of your work that you did, through your PhD, and talk about, protecting the brain and head trauma and concussion, which is, a reality in any contact sport, whether it's ice hockey, soccer, even obviously football. Could you walk us through, maybe some of the rates that we're seeing in college football, and then some of the work that you did doing your PhD?
Yep. And then as it's no secret, the rates as far as the concussions, arguably, it could be that we are just taking consideration and adjusting and addressing them more because of the awareness, or it could be that, just depending on whatever the argument may be. So in my sense, I'm trying to basically, my biggest thing was making sure that we're a part of that communication and that return to play process.
Yeah.
When I mean by we, I mean by us as a nutritionist and a dietitian. So we can intervene with the calories that they need and manipulate their dietary intake to counteract that lack of appetite that they may experience, or that lack of sleep, or whatever it may be, or that nausea, that vomiting, whatever it may be, as far as a part of symptomology within that situation, that we can help them address and meet what they need to kind of assist with that recovery process. We're a part of that communication. We're implemented in the early stages. We're implemented throughout the duration of the return to play protocol. We're implemented in the latter stages, even after they've been cleared to play, to ensure that they are staying recovered and there's no delayed symptoms at all, or post-concussive syndrome or anything like that whatsoever. So with my work, it was more so of being a part of that sports medicine team and staff, and making sure that within our protocols and our communication, our intervention is implemented beginning, during, and after.
That's amazing. And it's amazing how much things have changed, right? I mean, 20 years ago, there were no protocols, right? I mean, tell me a little bit about how it was from when you played to see how it is today, and that just dramatic shift, right?
I was shaking stuff off. When I played, I was just quote unquote shaking it off.
Yeah.
And it has gotten better, for where there was probably a fear of, you could say that if you're experiencing concussion, you don't want it to impact your playing time.
Yeah.
Because it impacts you having that ability to play, that exposure, and play the game that you love from not being cleared to play. So there's probably some that, as far as the sub-concussions or rare concussions, that everyone experiences, their symptoms are all it's completely different.
Yeah.
So to where some of the symptoms maybe that I had, it was just, I thought it was just another old day. Like, I had to shake it off. Sleep was messed up, but it is what it is.
Get back
I'll
to
come
it.
in tomorrow, get back to it. To where now we're not letting those symptoms slide by any means, or as much as possible.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can fine tune and be able to appreciate what some of these little lights in the dashboard are telling us, to be able to then say, okay, this athlete's actually okay, or versus this athlete needs more support with that. And, with your work around nutrition, I mean, what are some of the things that come up potentially to be able to help, for lack of a better term, protect the brain to some of the contact that you're going to experience in a sport like football?
Yep. And that's, again, if you go back into when we talked about our females compared to our males, what I'm doing compared with my basketball compared to our football. Now, granted, and you have some arguments within the gender discrepancies, as far as like females are more prevalent to experiencing a concussion in that sense. But now, since I'm having more of an impact related sport, that they're having more impact exposures day to day, it's more so that I'm trying to give them at least that 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams of DHA at the minimum daily. Changing their dietary intake for those omega-3 sources, changing their dietary intake of more antioxidants, more minerals as well, more things that will help with the hydration needs too, more vitamin D, more calcium, more magnesium, more potassium, more so having those conversations with them, because now we're all on the same page that creatine is not a demonized supplement. Creatine is nothing but a beneficial supplement.
It's amazing how long it's taken, and we're still not totally there yet. But
Right. I can't give it to you, but if you're going to take it, one, these are the type of supplements you need to be aware of. These are the ones you make sure that you're limiting your risk of banned substances and those exposures to that. And then also that you're taking it based upon your lean muscle mass that we have addressed and assessed in the beginning of basically the season.
100%. I mean, it's obviously such an important topic, and then a topic that's in the news and highlighted a lot more now, which is fantastic. But also even just in terms of mental health, because we can see, if we kind of dovetail here into the rest of mental health, which is just sort of the anxieties and the pressures and the things of playing, which, obviously head trauma can exacerbate. You guys are Notre-Dame football, man. That's pretty big. That's a lot of pressure, with your experience with athletes. I mean, obviously they're geared up to compete, but we know these things happen. And so, whether it's from your experiences or things you guys try to do now to help the sport athletes, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yep. So again, for my situation, I've changed all their menus to make sure that we're increasing their fish intake, increasing their nuts and seed intake as well, alongside with during their training table sessions or the sessions that we have those meals. After they have their competition, giving them as far as what they need supplement wise, since I can give them fish oil based upon what their weight and their frame is and position that they have and how many snap counts that they had too. And I mean, my snap counts is how many snaps that they're taking. So how many exposures to physical contact that they're having too. Yep. How many hits that they're being exposed to. It's going to be, as far as that will subjectively give me kind of, okay, how many grams of fish oil do I need to give them? How many to meet their DHA needs as well for the situation. And then also at that supplement time during those meals, after they have ate, giving them a probiotic, DHA, magnesium, and vitamin D, based upon whatever their needs are at that situation. Everyone is having, you can quote unquote say blanket of that throughout the team. And I'm able to do that. And I'm lucky to be able to do that. And I can control that. And I'm able to control and work with our dining team to ensure that we have the right foods that we need, exposures at all time, to be able to do that, to make sure that they're having that stuff 4 to 5 times out the week, alongside with 2 extra protein choices in case they don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, how key that relationship to the chef or to the kitchen staff is, to be able to create the meals that athletes will enjoy and want to eat and that type of thing. And listen, I mean, I could
Yes.
pick your brain here all day. I know you're tight. I know you're tight for time. So I want to
Thank you,
finish
brother.
off here by circling back to just, I know obviously you got kids at home,
Yeah.
young kids at home. So I'm just curious how, and I know obviously kids change how we view the world and how we communicate and all these types of
Man.
things. So I'm curious how has it changed your coaching or how you know, with your athletes, your interactions, you know, what are some of the, how has that impacted you?
Oh man. So it's impacted a lot. It's impacted a way of how I communicate. It's impacted a way of how my tolerance as well, and to be able to
Well said.
and to be patient. I feel like tolerance and patience has been the biggest adjustment. You can easily say that, you know, we're coming in here like it's either you do what I say or it is what it is.
Yeah, it's my way or the highway.
Right. And in the sense of that's not, there's always a gray area. There's always things that you're not realizing that those individuals are dealing with. There's always things that that you have to be mindful of. You got to be patient with them while also having a stern hand at the same time. You have to find a way of what's your best way to coach that individual to leaning towards a way it's important to them while also executing why and understanding the why they need to execute what you're trying to coach and educate them on. So I feel like having my kids and having the family has been able to give me that patience and tolerance to be able to discuss these things with them and to give them some sort of empathy at the same time, while also not only giving them empathy, but giving them a little bit of a structure of all right, look, I understand that we've been dealing with this for quite some time, but if you do not do this, this can potentially happen. So you have to change your circumstance. You have to change what you're doing, or else you're going to continue to having or potentially have an injury, or you're going to continue to address and continue to experience these situations of not feeling good for your workouts, for practice, not recovering, not sleeping, all these things.
Really well said, man. I mean, that's it, isn't it? Trying to understand things from their point of view. I mean, it's such a, and kids and young kids definitely do that. Patience, man. Well done with that. Listen,
Yeah.
again, I know you're pressed for time. I appreciate you carving out some time today, man. If people want to stay connected with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
Absolutely. So, and obviously we're getting towards the time of season. So my social media game will not be up to par. So I would say, but
We'll
all
just
my
tweet
social
at
media
you.
is the same. Yeah, just tweet at me, DM me, and I'll get to you when I can. I apologize. So my Twitter and my Instagram is Superior Frakes. You can contact me there, follow me there as well. From time to time, I post different articles or different things and share different resources, especially from people like you, Dr. Bubbs. And then also my LinkedIn is my name, Matthew R. Frakes, or Matthew Frakes, and Frakes is spelled like brakes, which you replace it with an F instead of a B.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, listen, best of luck this season with Notre Dame. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on it and keep in touch. And yeah, man, best of luck.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you, man.